Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sasha Starr, and I would like to start a quite unique show that we will be discussing everything related to COVID, which is extreme situation happened unfortunately in our lifetime. However, it's there, and we have to figure out what's the best way to deal with that. Hopefully, we'll sooner or later find out the regions of this terrible disease and what are we going to do to move forward. With that, I would like to introduce my guests who will definitely contribute to the show. One is also from Canada, as I am, James DeFiore, writer, producer, and director. Hello, James. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, Sam?
Then I would like to introduce Divya Chandra Thang. Sorry, my mistake. Chandradhara, Masters in Biochemistry, and she's from India, and she will definitely contribute to. Sorry for my.
No issues at all.
So really sorry. Then I would like to invite Rakesh Krishnan, educator, scientist, and researcher from New Zealand, although he has experience living in many, many other countries as well. The last one was Hong Kong before coming back to New Zealand. And finally, I would like to introduce Mark Lee from the United States. He is a specialist in media, radio relation. Welcome, Mark, to the show.
Good.
So let's start first of all with James. Please tell us your vision of everything to deal with the coronavirus. Hopefully, I don't expect you to tell us about its regions, but at least there are a lot of theories, and probably one of them is right. So why not to try?
Well, I think we could probably agree that from the beginning of the pandemic, the organization that was generally calling the shots for the entire planet was the World Health Organization. And if you were in any democracy, you would notice that when the World Health Organization put out a statement, that statement was not altered, usually repeated verbatim by the health officials in Canada, in the United States, and in countries all across the planet. So right away, there was a bunch of us that thought, okay, are we just going to take the World Health Organization, verbatim every time they speak? And then when we started to see politics seep in when it came to the origins of the virus, it seemed like overnight there was a conventional wisdom developed. And that conventional wisdom at the time was that this virus came from a wet market. And I think most serious people now dismissed that theory. Then came the lab leak theory. But then also came stories from around the world where they were retroactively testing water samples and blood samples in places like Brazil and places like Italy, and finding that the coronavirus was present in these samples as early as March 2019. So I think the best guess that we have, if I can just sort of wrap this up in a nice little bow, is that we don't know where it came from. We don't know when it came. And as much as we want to lean towards one theory or another, I think until we answer that question, it's going to be very difficult to demand any accountability.
But hold on. Accountability is just one of many problems what we're dealing with, because nobody in its right mind feels that in the next foreseeable future, we will be able to figure out exactly the regions. And not only that, but even go as far as to bring that country to accountability, and then probably even punish that. I think we are nowhere near there, or maybe I'm mistaken.
No, I think you're correct. I actually would go as far as saying I truly believe that we will never find out concretely the answer as to where and when coronavirus first broke out. I don't think that, I don't even know if it's possible. I know that I've heard some scientists talk about that when you look at the virus under a microscope, you can tell through protein strands and amino acids whether or not it was like forced to evolve in a lab or evolve naturally. But this is above my pay grade. But I don't think we're ever going to find out the origins of.
Okay, Divya, may I ask you to contribute to this from your point of view as the master's in biochemistry from India? What your thoughts about this subject?
See, initially it was origin of the coronavirus. They thought it was from the market, from the Wuhan market, and later our Joe Biden, he made a thesis stating that in 90 days you need to get the investigational report where it originated from. But recently we got the report that it was not conclusive, and there was no proper cooperation from the Chinese authority. It was not conclusive, like. But previously, in the mid of investigation, we also got some newses like the genetical makeup of coronavirus is so unique. It looks like very much like man-made. Naturally originated coronavirus cannot have such genetical makeup. And there were some stories like in the mining area there were some deaths happened in the people who were in the mining area, and there were some bat cages in the Wuhan lab. There were some cages where they kept bat. There's lot of conspiracies and theories which went on, but still now we don't have a proper ideation set from where it originated from. And after that, it's from a lab leak from Maryland. Even this news came out from Maryland, from a lab it leaked out. So a lot of theories came out during this uh, pandemic area, but still it's not inconclusive. Nothing is inconclusive, and nobody, even from the Chinese government, there was a lot of journalists who were working from other countries flew away from China. They were just they no more exist in China. Not much journalists from outside country once the pandemic started. So there is no actual realistic information which is coming out. And
Mhm.
looking at most of the mutants, usually it became less potent as days goes on. But the thing is, in India, if you see, first wave was not that harsh, but second wave was very harsh. Usually during, if you see any of the pandemic, as days pass on, the virulence of the virus goes down and down. But here the virulence has increased, the mutation has increased. Looking at all these things, there is a really a question mark. Nobody can predict anything about it unless we have a concrete evidence for what has really happened.
Mhm. I have now a question to Rakesh. Rakesh, tell me, as a scientist, do you think is it possible if we will take some supercomputer and we will feed all available information about possible origins where it was first detected, as for example, James said that it was first in Italy, discovered in March of 2019, well before the pandemic became all over the world. And we will feed all available information into the supercomputer. Do you think that would help to figure out the regions? But you see, the regions is just one of the problems. It's not the crucial problem. The crucial problem is what is ahead of us. How the humankind will be dealing with that. But still, if we will get to the point of understanding the regions, that will be interesting first step in the right direction. What do you think?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting discussion. Not only was it found in the wastewater. Very often they look at wastewater. Um, the actual you could pretty much say the epicenter of this pandemic started in Wuhan in terms of what was noticeable. What the other way people look at viral studies is looking at wastewater. And in Sweden and Italy, they did find in the wastewater, they found traces of these viruses. So I can quite understand why it is there's some element of doubt. Coming to one can with a computer backtrace to some extent the evolution of the virus based on what once it was identified as something causing an epidemic and then a pandemic. You can backtrace to some extent based on what you've seen from further variants. But even then, that's at best a guesstimate. The difference between this virus, an RNA-based virus, is that it's very large compared to other RNA-based viruses, including coronaviruses. And so, if you look at the structure, the virus has its spike protein it could alter quite a bit in its structure. And after it has entered, that's one part of it, transmission. And then after it enters replication, because of the large number of base pairs, it can generate a large variety of proteins that need to be, need to help it replicate. Because there's an intermediate protein that helps it replicate. And then you get the next versions of the RNA. So the slippage there, because of the large number of base pairs, makes it even more complicated. And perhaps that's the reason why it's getting more virulent rather than getting less virulent. So those are the facts that I could throw into the picture in terms of identifying, where it came from and, the past. I don't think we'll ever get to find that out. It's only natural that when some new illness comes and people don't recognize it as a new illness, they will try to pass it off as something which is old. But when one doctor in China did blow the whistle, bureaucracy intervenes and says, hush it up, we don't want the people in Beijing to know. And then it goes on, the cover-up builds. So that's natural. It would happen in any country. But the fact of the matter is today, we have one of the most dangerous forms of the virus. It's like one country with a huge population generated the virus. Another country with, again, huge population made the most virulent form of the virus. So one has to look at what these large gene pools, of what you call host populations do for this kind of virus. This is the scientist's viewpoint, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Now, question to Mark.
Yes.
Mark, you are a specialist in media relations, especially radio shows. And look, there is just what, for example, Rakesh described, and it's more scientific approach, but average people, they learn about all that from mass media, whether it's radio, television, and others. Do you feel that probably media didn't do the great job of informing the population of really what's happened? It was biased in some cases. It was not truthful in many cases, and hopefully it was truthful in at least some cases. What's your approach to that, Mark?
Well, a couple of things. One, I feel that journalists as a class generally try to get to the facts and try to find out what those facts are. But of course, they have their biases, and of course, they have their own personal concerns. So while we try to be objective as journalists, we also bring in our personal biases and personal concerns as well. So I've noted that was going on even in our mass media, whether that was the big network or a number of other things. And actually, I was actually going to bring a point that James brought up, which is we are now in an age of a lot of citizens journalists, because there are a lot of people that are putting out their views, putting out their viewpoints, because they have forums that they can put those out. I am actually oftentimes on the Clubhouse, and there are several groups in that are talking about vaccines, and they're talking about both the anti-vax side as well as the pro-vaccine side. And sometimes those folks are going at each other, head to head and all of that. And that also adds to some of the distrust that folks have in society. Y'all were talking about the pandemic and its history, and it's definitely had a very rich history now over several years and all of that. And you were talking about how it plays out. And I would even compare it to AIDS. That's one of the things I was getting ready to ask James, because if you look at AIDS, a lot of folks were never sure where it came from as well. There were all kinds of theories about it coming from Africa, about it being even tied into racism and things of that nature. So that came up even in the conversation of how AIDS came into our society. And there were some people who wanted to blame it on the LGBT community. There were some people who wanted to blame it on the African continent. There was a number of all kinds of crazy theories that were out there. And some of those theories are still floating out there as well. And I'm sure that James can even allude to that we're seeing that going on now, even with what we're seeing in these public media discourse rooms, because that's really what a Clubhouse or a Discord or a number of these other things are. They are citizen journalism at either its finest or at its worst, depending on your point of view and what these people are saying. So I don't know if I can toss it to James, but I'd love to hear his thoughts about that, because definitely that's one of the things that I've oftentimes been wondering is somebody that's really in the weeds in terms of knowing the history and everything, because I've even studied like the Spanish flu, and it seems like we're almost in the exact flow of what happened in the Spanish flu and everything, because it was a thing that was, everything was calm. We thought it was calm. Then there were some other breakouts in, I think it was the Midwest, and then we went through other variations. So it seems that even 100 years ago, we saw this happen in a similar kind of flow. So James, what are your thoughts about the comparison to the Spanish flu and also the media relations link?
Well, I was going to comment if it's okay about the comparison to AIDS, because I wrote a piece about a month ago where I made the same comparison. I was 15 years old, I think, when Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive. Mm-hmm. And I remember almost immediately after that hearing some of the most outlandish theories as to where it first came from. And the most popular one when I was young, living in Toronto, was that an African-American male had intercourse with a monkey and contracted the HIV virus. And it was just obviously littered with tropes and racism and things like that. But what it also made me think of as you were speaking is that the vaccine hesitant, which should be separated from the anti-vaxxer, there are a lot of people, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, there's a lot of people of color in the United States that don't trust their government to inject them with something because of historical reasons, because of the Tuskegee experiments, because of all of these things where they have the perfectly rational right to wonder and to doubt and to maybe even accuse the government of forcing them to take something against their will. So it becomes complex at that point. A lot of people don't realize that it's not like just the far right libertarians that are anti-vaxxers. It's also the far left, the naturopaths, the homeopaths, people like that. They don't want things injected inside of them. And then there's the people that just have a worthwhile grudge against the government, and they don't have it within them to trust them when the government says, trust us, we'll just inject you with this, it's going to be fine. Like, I think that there's a lot of pause, and rightfully so. So it's a lot more complex than people think. But you want people to take vaccines because they're safe. You want to believe that they're safe. But if the entity administering said vaccine has proven to be unsafe for your community in the past, I don't know what you do with that information at that point.
James, another question to you is, let's see, we have a concepts, for example, from history. We know that the first Roman emperor was Julius Caesar. And let's see, if you're telling me that, I can ask you, well, how do you know, James? You never lived at that time, so how can you be so sure? Well, what's happened is that slowly the certain opinion and perception of the facts is becoming a reality. So today nobody will argue about that, because you have to argue that, you have to come up with alternative theory strong enough to debate that. Now, obviously, it's not happening, and everybody knows that first emperor of Rome was Julius Caesar. Okay. who was actually killed very soon after he became emperor, as you know. But
I'm more of a Caligula guy, but go ahead.
yeah. But let me ask you this. I don't understand something that coronavirus is already for almost 2 years. Nobody is disputing that, at least. Okay, if that's the case, is there any consensus built in at least scientific community, which seems to me quite reasonable, and they have a lot of data today, at least, okay, let's forget about origins, because I don't think that consensus is there, but at least what's the best way to fight it? What about vaccination? What about what future is ahead of us is going to be staying with us for foreseeable future, and we have to just learn how to live with that? Or what's your opinion? Where are we going with all that?
I I think it's a little bit dark right now, because I think that what we're seeing develop, at least in North America, where I am, is almost like a Hunger Games scenario between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated they're not just being criticized, they're not just being insulted. The front page of the Toronto Star a few days ago had a quote, and it didn't really attribute who the quote was from, so people passing by would just see this. It was a statement that I'm paraphrasing, but it had the phrase "let them die," and it was referring to the people that didn't want to get vaccinated. And I see a second-class citizenry starting to develop now, and this strategy of being able to the strategy of sorry, I just got distracted because someone came in. The strategy of bullying and mocking the people that don't want to get the vaccine, or the people that are hesitant to get the vaccine, is clearly not working. And so I find it interesting. I guess I would say it's ironical that the people who are so angry that others aren't getting vaccinated are utilizing a strategy of complete dehumanization, as if that's going to convince them to go get vaccinated.
Hey, James, if I can just jump in real quickly, one of the things I'm curious about, and we were actually talking about it on a earlier show and everything, was the impact that it's having on our young people, and definitely the impact that it's having when they're being forced to vaccinate. I know here, I'm in Durham, North Carolina, that we talked about the fact that on October 1st, Duke University has said that you've got to be vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, you will be terminated. So they basically said that you've got to have the vaccination. If you don't have it, then you're going to be gone. And of course, we've also seen young people being told that they have to be masked when they go to schools. And as best I can tell, the young people, when I'm saying young people, I'm talking about elementary school students, are not really a big subset of those that are, even while they may be catching the virus, they are not part of the massive amount of people that are having fatalities. There are a few outliers, but they're not the majority. But you're telling them that they have to wear masks and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this and the whole concept of being masked and also being forced to be vaccinated if you haven't had the vaccination.
Well, I see a scientist that's really chomping at the bit, so I'm going to defer to the scientist on the panel.
Sorry, just chime in here. We just got the vaccine. I mean, the Delta variant in New Zealand for about a couple of months now. About 3 weeks. And the spread has been so rapid. It's just astonishing. And young people are also being affected. In Fiji, a 1-month-old child died day before yesterday. 1-month-old child of COVID. So that immunity that we assume for the alpha and beta and gamma variants, that game has completely changed. So you might want to rethink that.
Now, I'd like to address this issue. It appears to me, or at least from my experience in Toronto, that the issue of vaccination or non-vaccination is becoming a very hot political issue. Now, and not only that, it's becoming a practical issue from the point of, Rakesh, tell me the idea of vaccination, at least how it was presented in Ontario, because the plan was, say at the beginning of the year, the plan was that by April or latest May, the Ontario will be completely coronavirus free territory or province or whatever it might be. Why? Because believed was that almost 100%, it cannot be 100, but close to it, would be done instantly to all people. And in my unscientific mind, that could actually result in basically defeating coronavirus, because if all are okay, we didn't know at the time about Delta variation. We didn't know many things, what we know today. But at least the belief was that all vaccinated, then how you can infect somebody else if you're vaccinated and he is vaccinated and everybody else is vaccinated. In practice, it didn't work. First of all, the vaccine started a little bit later than we thought because of the logistics. Then what happened is that there was a resistance from groups of people to be vaccinated. So not only 100%, but even 70% already became sort of questionable whether it will be achieved. I think in Ontario today, actually more than 70% are vaccinated, but then it means almost 30% non-vaccinated. So they can still, first of all, they can get sick themselves easily. Much easier than those who are vaccinated. That's all the data suggests that that's the case. So there are two problems. Number one, that the unvaccinated people actually can get the coronavirus. Then, because of the coronavirus, never mind Delta variation, they can infect vaccinated people. And because of that, all the concept about herd immunity is defeated in a way. So, and because of Delta variation, so everything I think, at least in Ontario, everything went wrong, unfortunately. Rakesh, do you agree that if all people or close to it would be vaccinated at the same time, not in a matter of 6 months or so, but at the same time, in a matter of 1 week, for example, almost unrealistic scenario, but still, would that be creating
it would largely provide a solution, partly because of the fact that the virus would have less viral load per person, because what the vaccination does is it reduces the viral load. It doesn't completely prevent the virus from entering your body, because this is such a variable virus, because of the huge DNA molecule that is there, RNA molecule that is there. So it will not prevent you from getting this, but it will certainly reduce the viral load, which means to some extent the transmissibility and the mutation, the possibility of mutations reduces, because each time the virus replicates in your body, it has a chance for mutation. So that is what causes mutations. And when even in a country like India, which had the largest factory for vaccines in the world, we had problems. We had the Delta variant coming because we just didn't have the capacity to produce so much. And I think in other parts of the world also, people would, with this tendency of market economics, you tend to build the biggest factory in one place instead of distributed factories all over the world. So what happens is that by the time you get that factory is never going to be able to supply the whole world instantaneously. It would not be economically viable. So it works out a media level of performance, which cannot supply the world all at once. And that's where we have this problem. We have all these variants all over the place.
Divya, may I ask you, please address the also same vaccination against non-vaccination issue and how it's handled in different countries?
Okay. In India, initially when the first wave came, most of them were not ready to accept vaccination process. Actually, there was lot of myths telling that, oh, if you're vaccinated, lot of side effects will happen, and there's lot of blind belief in India. If there is a side effect, they get into some other blind belief, not in the urban area, at least in the rural area of India. There was lot of hindrance to take the vaccination. But when during the second wave took off, when they saw a large amount of people, ICUs, hospitalization, slowly awareness created in a very good way, so that people started getting into vaccination, and they themselves with self motivation went and got their vaccination there. Though there is a small amount of population who are still worried about the effects of vaccination, but lot of awareness that has come when they saw other countries. For example, they saw they used to listen in the news like Israel has been more than 50% vaccinated, 60%. They are just seeing 100 to 200 cases per, and other examples of US being vaccinated so much. Every country's vaccination percentage going high. Yeah, if you see completely 2 doses vaccination, you can't see more than five, not even more than 5 to 10%. We can't see. So looking at all these things, India was also had that hindrance initially, but now if you see yesterday's almost 1 crore vaccination in entire country in a day. That's almost 10 million vaccination in a single day. This is a kind of speed where vaccination is going on in India, and definitely they are all aware of the new variants and mutants. Even people in the rural area are talking about the new variants and mutants. They are telling that the old variant may not be there now. We have to get vaccinations. Awareness is created in a very good way that people are also thinking about the third booster dose. One of the company or Serum Institute owner, he took the third booster dose and gave an example. Not 2 doses may not be enough. The antibodies may go in 6 months. So I am taking the third booster dose, and I am giving 8,000 employees of my own the third booster dose. So even the certain amount of people are thinking about third booster dose, and as if the 60 to 70% of population are vaccinated, a kind of herd immunity will be created by vaccination. Initially, we were thinking about the natural herd immunity. Now, vaccinating 60 to 70% of population also can give you a kind of herd immunity. This is a kind of awareness which is spreading slowly in India. So people are not much people are thinking negative about the vaccination. Definitely, they are coming forward to take the vaccination. The only question arises here, coming the new variants which are coming up with, will that vaccine work for the new variants is the question which not we are not able to answer still, because
Thank you.
that the
Uh,
spike will change in the spike protein is changes, so the this vaccine may not work, that vaccine may not work. There are very small number studies have gone, they have just studied in 20 people, 50 people, and this cannot be conclusive. They need to do a huge antigen and antibody studies on all the vaccinated population who was what kind of variant. They want to do a genomic sequencing, what kind of variant. All these things has to be thoroughly studied and researched. Then only we can come to a conclusion.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you, and also James. What is, in your opinion, the role of a big pharma in? You see, there are. I think this is by far very important issue. The media we discuss, and the third question will be the social media, internet. And so on. So let's address big pharma. What is their role in all this?
Well, first of all, I think the world probably could use another Jonas Salk, who was the person who discovered the polio vaccine.
Right.
Because in Canada, what we saw was all these bids, and we're talking about human lives, and then we're talking about corporate bidding wars for government contracts. And a lot of us were thinking that may have been missing the spirit of trying to conquer this pandemic. The profit motive. I'm in a country with socialized medicine, and I love it, and I think it's great. And I don't understand why the profit motive is included in a world crisis like this. So I think the job of big pharma should be moving forward. Maybe all these companies can have a summit where they agree that they just share these patents, that it doesn't come to the highest bidder, that the prices are universally accepted, that there isn't a differentiation in price between between the name brand and the generic. I think that couldn't they use a better public relations image remake right now. Like, no one trusts big pharma in the sense that we think that they have our best interest in mind. We think that they want to turn a profit. Sometimes turning a profit and our best interests align. Sometimes they don't. And I think the timeliness of this vaccine, although it was kind of rapidly released, it wasn't approved in a lot of countries while it was being administered. And I think that was a decision that they had to make. But yeah, I think we need, to learn from history and turn back the page to Jonas Salk and take the profit motive away from the vaccines.
But James, tell me one more thing about social media effect, because that deals directly with the reluctance of so many people to be vaccinated, because they're not consuming the normal media. They are in a world in themselves, and they immediately contact each other and send links to read this or read that. Most of what they read is misinformation. Sometimes it's outright lies. And because of that, this, for example, in Ontario, I believe 30% people are unvaccinated and they are reluctant to get vaccinated. So they affect the all the positive points of vaccination of the rest of 70% of population. It comes short in a way because of the social media effect. So now people are those who are getting furious, those who are vaccinated, and those people who are not vaccinated. And in fact, you're probably aware that in, for example, in Toronto area, most of the people who were on a lockout for a long period, I think Toronto had the longest lockout in the world, 3 months, probably longer, because of the existence of so many unvaccinated people who are reluctant to get vaccinated. And I understand that people are getting furious at these people because, now they are going to get vaccinated, most of them, because of the passport, because vaccinated and so on. So most of them will get vaccinated. But it's too little, too late. Because if they would do it like when everybody else did, maybe there wouldn't be a Delta variation and maybe several other consequences. So now, okay, so they will get vaccinated, but that's not the same. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think so. Say there's 20% of the population in Ontario that are just never going to get vaccinated. Maybe that's true. Some of the blame has to be laid at the government's feet, and the reason why is because you could go down the list. It's a long list of things that they announced at the beginning of the week and then contradicted by the end of the week without taking any responsibility for the about phase. And so a lot of people in the public, and you can include me in this, didn't trust what they were saying. I had no idea if what they're saying was true. A lot of what they're saying that they claimed was true turned out to be false. The examples are things like at the very beginning of the crisis, the Canadian government said that our health minister actually said this. If we close the border with the United States, that could actually worsen the pandemic. And journalists were just looking at each other, wondering what this person just said. And then they never corrected it. All they did was close the border. So when you're already doubting government, when you don't trust them, and then you can see in real time things that they are saying, and even if they make mistakes, not owning any of their mistakes, it becomes a monumental task to try to then convince these people, a group of people that don't trust you anyways, have watched you lied, and then you want them to trust you. And even Justin Trudeau on the campaign trail the other day was like, if you don't want to get vaccinated, fine, but we shouldn't have to put up with you sitting beside us. So, I mean, we can be as angry as we want at the people who don't want to get vaccinated. We have to be very careful not to paint them by their worst representatives. They're not all far-right racist people who have a big Jesus bent. A lot of them are just people that are concerned for their kids. They're concerned for their own health. They're very confused. This is not their area of expertise. And we shouldn't have to force everyone to become pseudo researchers to have to look everything up that we're being told because we don't trust the people that are telling it to us.
James, I mean, part of that, and it comes back to what you were saying, Sasha, about the media, is that there is, and you alluded to it earlier, there's a lot of history, and it's not just in the African American history. You definitely alluded to the Tuskegee experiment, but there have also been several experiments that existed within the women population here in the United States. There are also several that existed within the Latin American population as well that has caused people to be very concerned. And while you can say that some of those links and some of those things are not factual, there's a whole lot of them that are factual. So that's why a lot of people have those hesitancies when it comes to getting vaccinated, because they do remember the history of Tuskegee. They do remember the history of some of the early, and I definitely agree that a Salk would be great, but there were some early smallpox experiments that were done on Native Americans and other folks in society as well. So definitely some of those things play into people's mindset. Now, you've got some theories out there that are very interesting. Like I've heard some people talking about what's in the vaccine and whether it's a microchip being put into our veins to actually do some kind of dystopia kind of conversations of which way the world is going and all of that. So I'm not going to quite buy into that theory, but there are some other things that are out there that are very legitimate.
Okay, can I just add one thing quickly? Is that another thing that had a massive negative ancillary impact on those who were vaccine hesitant was the way that COVID deaths were being reported.
Yes.
Nobody at the beginning understood, at least to generalize, almost nobody really understood that when they were seeing these deaths, especially the death toll in the United States and how fast that was rising. We didn't know until people started asking questions, maybe in the summer of 2020 or maybe somewhere around there, that these deaths were not just because of COVID. And it turned out that people who died just of COVID, and I'm not saying that COVID is not dangerous when I say this, but people who died just of COVID, it was like 7%. And so all of a sudden, a big swath, the majority of the population all of a sudden realized, oh, okay, and this is still really good information to have, that COVID is especially harmful to people who are obese and people who have diabetes and people who are old. So what that did is that it created almost a sense of what pandemic? This pandemic, it only affects old people. It only affects people with pre-existing conditions. And so by the time the vaccine rollout occurs, you have a whole bunch of people that are like, why am I getting a vaccine for the thing that kills old people and people who are obese? Again, government messaging. If you could go back in time, and I know you can't, but maybe for the next pandemic, what they might want to do is just be as transparent as possible from the very beginning. This is a dangerous disease. It's especially dangerous for people who are obese, but it is still dangerous. It's like pneumonia times 5, and even if you don't have a pre-existing condition, it can be quite harmful to you. If they were able to paint a full picture like that, I think that you would see vaccination rates a lot higher than you do right now.
Yeah,
Please.
I'd like to just, without really trying to, I'm trying to stand in the shoes of a government official who really doesn't know too much about an absolutely new virus. And he has to manage people, their emotions, and their reactions. It's a hard call, when you really don't know it. But even the scientists are learning about things. And the scientists are also just sort of groping their way in the dark. It is really hard call to tell them these are the facts, about this virus. It is this dangerous, this or this innocuous, as the case may be. So it's easy to say, yes, the government should have done this, should have done that. We have a government who's very, very transparent here in New Zealand, and even Shay, Jacinda Ardern, who's done a pretty good job up till now, and I think even yet, it's a really hard thing to do, especially when people don't understand what is how dangerous the Delta virus is. But we get announcements every day of how many new cases are there, and that transparency has made all of us in New Zealand, at least, aware of the danger of this virus. So all of us, in the beginning, when it was the alpha variants and things like that, we were not so, we could walk around without masks. We were not, we were, they were sort of contained it. But now with the Delta variant, it's out of control. Within, I think, about 10 days, 500 cases. And and out of that, 18 are in the ICU, and one lady died, and that's queered the picture even more. She was given the COVID vaccine and she died the next day.
Wow.
So what do you do?
Well, that's what I was going to say. What about this shock value? Because even when it first came out, I mean, you would hear people talking about population control, and of course, we saw all those images around the world of the body bags and things of that nature. So, from a media standpoint, I understand that you want to get the message out there. You want to show people how serious this pandemic is and what its impact is on society. But at the same time, that's a lot of very heavy shock value for people to absorb. And I think that that's why a lot of folks are still in a state of shock, because like I said, if you're sitting there, you're watching the news and you're seeing these images of the body bags that we saw in the early state, and then you're also hearing people that are throwing out theories about whether this could be a form of population control, which has definitely been in world society. It has actually happened in everything. So that also plays into it as well. So I don't know if Divya's got any thoughts, and definitely it's Sasha's show. So I'm gonna let Sasha take back over his whole show.
Okay, Divya, would you have some thoughts? First of all, there is a new mutation by the name C12. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And number two, question is, why do you think that Africa is less infected and impacted actually by the coronavirus than any other continents? What do you think?
Maybe the immunity level of people. If you see in other countries, infection positivity rates are too high. In other countries, not everybody might be going for tests. They might have ignored. They might have got mild symptoms and they might have taken care of themselves in home isolation, or they're not ready to go for a test, or they were acquired a kind of immunity in them, antibodies in them, so that even though they got the virus or the infection, it's not been affected in a higher level. There's maybe the food style, maybe if you see the Africans, they're well built. Maybe the strength and stamina they have. There's huge wide variety of reasons, and I see one reason is maybe the number of testing also. If you can see in other countries, the number of testing going on is huge. The number of testings is not that great in African countries compared to the other countries. Even in India, initially it was less, but later people started, if they get a slightest of symptom, they were getting sick. Entire family used to get tested. If somebody was in contact with someone else, their contact and their primary, secondary, tertiary contacts, all of them used to get tested. This kind of awareness or these kind of things may not be in Africa, so maybe that positivity rate would be less. And also the death reporting, not every country is truly reporting the right numbers to the government, how many deaths have happened, how many positivity rate. Even in our countries, in certain states, they showed it is less positivity, though there were more number of cases, and they bridge to the laboratories telling you should do only these many tests per day. They put a scale to the labs of certain labs who are doing large number of tests. You should do only these many thousands of tests, just to showcase to people we have reduced the number of positivity rate. COVID has come down. The government has really worked hard to showcase all these things. Even politically, so many aspects is involved here.
I'd like to mention also, beside Africa, there are two countries that apparently, in my opinion, or my information, didn't have any cases of coronavirus. The two countries are Afghanistan and Grenada. Both countries at different times were invaded by the United States, and it seems to me there are some positive effects from U.S. invasion, that both countries avoided coronavirus, or at least maybe there were coronavirus, but it was not reported because they were not diagnosed, and they just let it go. So I'd like to first of all,
number of travelers also. If you see in India, if you see just Kerala as a state, most number of people who are going outside their country for studies or for job is from Kerala. Most maximum cases are from Kerala. Every day, even now, they are reporting 20 to 30,000 per day. Where if you see in Karnataka or other states where there is larger population than Kerala, it is very less. It's in few thousand, 1,000, 2,000. So the traveling part also plays an important role where there is international traveling history. Which state or which place has more traveling, more travelers coming in, or people, their country are traveling outside, their cases you can see in more what I have seen.
thank you so much. I would like to have a great thanks to all panel participating in this program. We've covered the best we could the extremely complicated issue. It's a medical issue, it's a scientific issue, it's a political issue for sure. And in fact, maybe it's even more political than scientific or medical issue. So right now we are at the point where we are trying to gather more information. We are going to talk more about the media effect on all this issue. And I'm looking forward to another program with you guys. Thank you so much. All the
Thanks,
best.
guys. Nice to meet all of you.
Keep safe.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.